Does your church have Left Behind series books in the library? I would suggest you bring them. Josh, once again, jumping the gun on my cold open here.
You paused too long.
I'm sorry. Anyway, welcome back to Main Buns of Jesus. I'm Pastor Ben Olschlager here with you once again. And as always, my co-host, Pastor Josh Laborious.
His disgruntled, salty co-host.
Yeah, he's both of those things in spades today.
Most days, honestly.
Yeah, and it's mostly because, like, in the second episode, we're recording 2 episodes today because it's almost Easter, and we don't want to die next week. So that's, ideal. But I've also gotten him worked up for our second episode already.
Yeah, you guys got to listen in next week because it's going to be, we got a good one for you that day.
Yeah, if you enjoy listening to truth-filled rants, it's going to be a good one for you. Anyway,
unhinged truth-filled rants, but it's fine.
Yes. Fine. Yeah. So this week we're taking a look at more things we didn't learn in seminary, and we're kind of continuing on with the vein that we've talked about the last couple of weeks, where we're looking at some of the pop theology things that have made their way into a lot of Lutheran congregations and how we can start to address those. We've looked at predestination and what it means, what it should be, what it isn't, and this week we're looking at. Did we look? That's something else last week?
Decision theology.
Oh, yeah, we did decision theology last week, too. Blanking on that one there. And then this week, we're going to take a look at the Rapture, which is why I'm telling you to burn your Left Behind books. So, for a little reference here, I went to a essentially a non-denominational Christian school for middle school, and those were on the shelf. I had not learned about end times theology to that point in my Lutheran education, so I didn't know what to believe. I'm glad it's been straightened out because those books were terrifying. I'm a sensitive soul, so that, yeah.
Ben's a big old softy.
I am. My fight or flight response, though, is always fight because I know I'm not that fast.
Fair enough. It's just reminding me, last night after the Lenten service, I raced the kids in my robes, and I lost, but you know what? I feel like if I gave it another go, I could beat them.
You could take them? Yeah. Anyway.
It's worth mentioning, just before, because I don't know if we're going to circle back to them at all. The Left Behind books, some people hold to them as gospel truth. They're fiction. They're quite explicitly, intentionally works of fiction. So, there's that, folks. But the Rapture, we figured a good place to start would be to explain what the word actually means. And if you're listening to this, you might be like, that's not what I think it means. And it's one of those instances where that word might not mean what you think it means.
It's a great Princess Bride moment.
Never actually seen that movie all the way through. I've been told I would really enjoy it, but I haven't seen it.
You would. I'll affirm that for you today.
So,
if we get enough likes on this episode from across all of the platforms, if we get over 100 likes on this episode, we will force Josh to sit down and watch The Princess Bride all the way through. And then we will have an episode on his takeaways and how he would turn that into a sermon.
Maybe we'll do a live stream of me watching The Princess Bride. That's a terrible idea. We shouldn't do that.
That sounds like a pretty big commitment.
So the Rapture, and I'm going to read some of this because I, as part of my research for this, I looked at the article on Wikipedia to see what Wikipedia says the Rapture is, and especially the introductory paragraph is actually pretty good. Okay, so this is what it says. The Rapture is an eschatological position. That means it's a position about the end times held by some Christians, particularly those of American evangelicalism. That's why it's so popular, is because it's an idea that kind of grew up over here. Consisting of an end-time event where all dead Christian believers will be resurrected and, joined with Christians who are still alive, together will rise in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. This is typically a view of dispensational premillennialism. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. It's this idea that at some point, all the Christians are just going to be taken up. in
I
the
love the sound effect there. That was perfect.
I nailed it.
Yeah.
This is what I really want to draw attention to. This is the last paragraph of their introduction. Most Christian denominations do not subscribe to rapture theology and have different interpretations of those texts. They do not use rapture as a specific theological term, nor do they generally subscribe to dispensational theology associated with its use. Instead, we'll typically interpret rapture in the sense of the elect gathering with Christ in heaven. And we reject the idea that a large segment of humanity will be left behind on earth for an extended tribulation period. So if you're thinking, okay, who actually believes it? Because there are going to be Christians in any given denomination who will hold this view, even if it is in conflict with the denomination they are affiliated.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as official theology on the books, a rapture is most commonly found among fundamentalist Baptists, Bible churches, Brethren churches, certain Methodist denominations, Pentecostals, non-denominational churches, and other evangelical groups. You'll notice most all of those, with the exception of the Methodists, are New World denominations who wouldn't necessarily, even though they kind of have their philosophical roots in Old World denominations, they would not point to history overseas before America was founded. Whereas we Lutherans, we would say, well, our theological tradition goes back to Martin Luther in the 1500s.
Yeah, and even the Methodist, and I'm guessing that they're lumping some of the holiness movement, the Nazarenes, Wesleyans, that kind of thing in there too.
Yeah.
Those kind of denominations that aren't necessarily explicitly American in their background. The segments of those denominations that lean into this kind of theology are American. So yes, you'll find it in those denominations heavily. You'll find it in, old school denominations like Lutheranism, Catholicism.
Well, here's the rest of this note.
Go ahead.
The Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Lutheran churches, the Anglican Communion, and Reformed denominations have no tradition of this preliminary return of Christ.
Yeah.
Amillennialist is what typically that is called.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are even post-millennial. There are some strains of Lutheranism that will accept post-millennials as well. Which it's just a little bit different view on the end times, but it's not rapture theology. It's not the same kind of branch. And if you look at all of these denominations that we're talking about and the way that they are viewed around the world, their theology often doesn't include the rapture. Because guess what? They read the Bible and they see it's not there.
Wait, this isn't consistent.
Yeah. It's wild, right?
Yeah, and so where this comes from, and this is kind of the last on explaining the concept of the rapture. There are a couple of, we'll call them theologians. There are a couple of theologians who wrote about it earlier than this, but where it mostly comes from is, and I'm missing, here's is a guy named John Darby in the 1830s.
Yeah, wandering preacher in early America.
Yeah, surprise, was kind of kicked out of his original denomination, and he started his own. Okay, and I'm sure I've shared this on the show before. Here's some wisdom I received from one of our professors at the seminary. The esteemed Bruce Shucker said this in my level 1 biblical interpretation.
Did he preface this with "Hear me now, believe me later"?
Probably.
Okay.
That's something he said a lot. He said, we were talking about a paper we had to write. He said, if you're looking at a text and you have a thought that no one has ever had about that text, commentaries don't say it, the study notes don't say it, you're the first one to ever think this. You're probably wrong. And part of our American spirit says, no, you could be an inventive genius and you saw something that no one ever saw. You're probably not. Because here's the thing, okay, the Bible is a pretty important book. And people have thought it's a pretty important book for a very long time. There have been very wise people who have dedicated their entire life to reading and understanding the Bible for hundreds of years, for thousands of years, in fact. So for you to see something and make connections about a topic that it's not like it's a new topic that they didn't have to think about. This is a very old topic. They've been thinking about this since, Jesus was here.
For a hot minute.
You're saying you were wiser or more observant or smarter than all of them? Are ya? Are ya, John Darby? And this is something, for a theological concept, anytime I see something, well, if you're doing research and you point to evidence that is older than 5 years, people say, it's probably out of date. Theology goes the other way. If you see a theological thing and it's recent, like if I see 1800s, 1900s, thousands, for me, like a yellow flag goes up. It's like, oh, you're probably off. So, like, when I was doing this, looking at the Rapture, and I was like, oh, someone thought of this in 1833? Like, you're probably wrong. You're probably, and it turns out, yeah, he was. So.
2 quick notes on that. One, that same argument of, like, if you see it comes from the 18 or 1900s, it's probably wrong. It's the same kind of argument that a lot of church bodies will use against, like, specifically that Orthodox and Catholic churches will use against most Protestant denominations.
Which is fair.
Yeah, it is a fair question to pose. But as
we have a response to it, but
yeah, and our response as Lutherans is typically, we look at the fathers too. We look at the church fathers. We look at the early writers of the church. We look at scripture, and we go, what actually aligns with what they are writing and talking about? And we think it's us. That's what we're not trying to be new. We're trying to be old.
We didn't come up with something new. We just brushed off the old stuff.
One of our professors said he met a guy, I can't remember what denomination he was from, but he's not Lutheran. And he once asked him what the reputation of Lutherans is. And I believe we were called theological dinosaurs. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Especially if your kid likes dinosaurs, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah. I will note there's like an asterisk on this, and that is to deal with new issues. So, like, if you're writing theology about what is a faithful take on technology.
That was exactly my second piece.
That doesn't send up yellow flags, because it's like, okay, the people thousands of years ago didn't write about this because it wasn't an issue they were thinking about dealing with.
Yeah.
So that's the exception.
So if you want to look into that kind of thing, there's actually a really interesting, what's the guy's name? I was going to recommend a podcast, but now I can't remember the name of the podcast.
Is it a 1517 thing? Or
no, it was a secular podcast. And the guy looked at the Catholic tradition of casuistry, which Lutherans we've adopted too, and how you approach new theological challenges through old theological lenses. And the specific example he gave was the way that the Catholic Church approached the issue of insurance. And they were wondering whether it was gambling or not. And it was a really, really interesting conversation.
I think I've read an article about that.
Yeah, it was a really, really interesting conversation. So, like, sometimes you have to have a real conversation about something challenging. Like, you're required as a church to have insurance on your building. So what do we do with that? I mean, we probably could claim it a religious exemption, but...
Can we faithfully do that? We got to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'll see if I can find the podcast. It's a pretty big podcast. I can't remember. I'm sorry I'm blanking on the name, but I'll find it for the show notes. And anyway, that kind of thing, when you have new application, that you'll find all the time.
Yeah.
Because we keep coming up with technologies that the people of Jesus' day could have never imagined. God obviously knew they were coming, so he gave us the tools to deal with them. But, like, you're applying things in new ways that people could not have dreamed of when they wrote scripture. Yeah.
So a little bit more on the rapture. It is a newer theology. It is this idea that there's, the world is continuing as it is, and there is some date where Jesus is going to come back again. And so far we're like, yeah, that sounds right. Like Jesus' second coming, we're all on board. where we stop being on board is they say, and he's going to gather up all the Christians, and then you're going to have this like and then there's the 1,000-year reign of Christ, where it's like some sort of paradise, or there's a like how people order it is different. And then there's the last judgment. And we say, no, there's the last judgment and the second coming are one and the same thing. This is it. Yeah. So the rapture is specifically that second coming before the final judgment, which we would say, if you look at Revelation and some other places in the Bible where the last days are talked, nothing really ever indicates that there's this separation between the two. And there is some language in Revelation that is taken to interpret. There's this 1,000-year reign of Christ, and it all revolves around taking that very, very literally. And that's the millennium, is this 1,000-year reign of Christ. Whereas Lutherans and most other denominations in the world would say that's a symbolic number. There's not a literal 1,000 years we're looking for somewhere. It's just, we're in this age of the church. Since Jesus walked the earth until he comes back, this is the age of the church. And when he comes back, that will be the second coming and the final judgment of creation. So this is what the rapture is. And that's a little bit of a window into what different kinds of millennialism are. I almost feel like those would be an episode on its own.
Yeah.
There's a handy dandy graph on the Wikipedia page that you can look at. It's actually fairly helpful in understanding what's going on here. Anything to add before we step forward, Ben?
No, I think that's probably fine.
I found what I was looking for. There's also a handy dandy figure in Logos, but you can't see that because you probably don't have Logos. You listening to this, Ben and I are uniquely blessed.
By the way, it was a Malcolm Gladwell podcast.
He's for anyone who doesn't know, Malcolm Gladwell is a prominent voice, especially in leadership theory. He's written a lot of books.
And I think I don't know that he's converted to, but he's wrestled with Christianity in recent years, like leaning into it as a possible truth. So
that's progress.
Yeah. Anyway, one thing that we want to do quick before we jump into how do you walk with people who are, enraptured by this theology.
You're the worst.
Thanks, Josh.
Listeners, if any of you laughed at that, I'm disappointed. And if you're going to comment in support of Ben doesn't read the comments, so you're just going to get a snarky reply from me.
I do read the comments, especially when Josh tells me that there's nice comments. So thank you for those. But
always saying nice things about Ben. My office is clean and well organized.
This is my home office, which the space behind me is actually my wife's craft area. Well, it's the storage for her craft supplies. There's no actual way to use that space.
Crafting table?
Yeah.
You had to punch a bunch of trees to get it.
Yep.
If you got that joke, you can laugh at that one.
Anyway, just a quick, brief layout of what we as Lutherans understand about this time period, like the end of time and what this will look like. It doesn't include the rapture. Instead, like all of the things that we see in Revelation, all of the things we see in books like Daniel and Ezekiel that kind of start to point to end timesy kind of looking stuff. We believe those to kind of all play out at the same time. The reign of Jesus is now. He's defeated Satan.
Yeah.
He's defeated the grave. It's not fully defeated. Like sin, death, and the devil are not fully defeated because it's not yet time for that. Like
yes, the now and not yet.
Yeah.
We're going to celebrate this whole thing this weekend.
Yes.
If you listen to this episode as it comes out.
Yes. Yeah.
This is what we do every year at Easter.
Yeah. So we call this the church age, which is from Jesus' ascension to Jesus' return. It is the age where Jesus reigns in heaven and the church is here on earth doing his will. Josh is making weird faces at someone. 4
of the ladies in my office are all standing in the hallway talking right now, and I gotta be honest, it's making me a little nervous.
That's fair.
That's probably fine.
Yeah. And at the same time, a lot of people with rapture theology will talk about this thing called the tribulation. There's supposed to be 1,000 years of tribulation, just as there's 1,000 years of the church age. Again, we think of it as just a symbolic number, meaning a long time, because that's what the Bible used the number 1,000 for a lot. It meant a lot. So a lot of people, a lot of mouths, a lot of soldiers, a lot of years, and there's no clear indication that John means anything but symbolic stuff in what he's talking about. Like, I'm sure he has very little clue how to describe anything he's seeing in front of him in his revelations. 1,000-year period specifically, he's just ballparking.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah. Anyway, so like we believe that the tribulation is also currently happening because bad stuff happens to God's people
And to not God's people.
and to
That's
not God's
something,
people.
if you look in Revelation, the tribulation, some are only God's people, some are only not God's people, some are both.
Yeah.
And it's like the four horsemen of the apocalypse that are it's like an image that's very prevalent in pop culture because it's a cool image. We look at, if you honestly look at them and what they are supposed to symbolize, it's, oh, now I'm going to forget what they
Death, pestilence,
well, it's death,
war, and famine.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty confident on 3 of those. I'm not positive on the famine one.
Well,
but
scarcity, famine is.
Yeah. Anyway,
but if you look at the world since Jesus has walked the earth, those 4 things have been a constant.
mm-hmm.
I did this for a sermon once. If you look back, there is not a time in recorded history where the entire world has been at peace. Now, there have been times of relative peace, but there is always a war going on somewhere. Even if it's a small-scale civil war in a smaller country, there's always conflict. And that's true with disease, that's true with scarcity, that is definitely true with death. So we look at Revelation, we say, well, it's all happening, and it's all going to keep happening until Jesus comes back. So we're amillennialists. We say we're basically just waiting for Jesus to come back.
Yeah. And when we look at some of the texts that people around Rapture theology really lean into, the big ones, I think typically that I've seen pointed at, Matthew 24, which 1 taken, 1 left, 2 in the field, 1 taken, 1 left, 2 at the mill, 1 taken, 1 left. It's very clearly talking about the return of Jesus, which is not what the rapture is. Like in Rapture theology, the rapture is just Christians disappearing. It's not the return of Jesus. So if you're including the return of Jesus in with your rapture, then it's no longer the rapture.
There's a variation of rapture where Jesus collects the Christians. I don't know if he comes down to do so, but like he's involved.
But it's still not the return of Jesus.
Right. It is not the full.
Which is what Matthew 24 is talking about. And then the other one being 1 Corinthians 15, the end of 1 Corinthians 15, which the rapture is supposed to be this like stealthy thing. If you ever watch the Left Behind movies, there are like scenes where people will be driving down the highway and they'll just disappear from their cars and their cars will just go like slamming into the median. And like that's kind of how the rapture is depicted pretty frequently. And 1 Corinthians 15 is like, yeah, Jesus is going to show up with like trumpets and fanfare. It's not going to be a quiet or subtle thing at all. Like the world will know he's back.
So this is another text that people will point to for the rapture is 1 Thessalonians 4. And it says this, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words." So this is a big text for rapture theology, and they kind of take parts of it and they focus like who are left, who are caught up together with them. They think this is going to be a very literal thing, and we're like, no, this is talking about Jesus coming back and he's gathering faithful to himself. The issue is at its core, I think, an unwilling to like a desire to take language hyper literally without any appreciation for the fact that scripture very, very frequently uses rhetorical devices, and that's at play here. So, and also the passage ends with verse 18. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. I don't think I've ever heard anyone use their rapture theology to encourage other people. As Ben said, he was terrified as a kid.
Yeah. It's used as a club, not as a
Encouragement.
yeah.
It's like this, what Thessalonians is talking about is a promise that one day we're going to be reunited with all of the Christians who have gone before us, and we're going to be with Christ forever. That's
Yeah.
what Thessalonians is talking about.
That's also
And
what 1 Corinthians 15 is talking about.
It gets kind of taken out of context for these people who are really excited about their rapture.
Yeah. So, lastly, what do we do with this? What do we do if we have brothers and sisters in our congregations who believe this stuff and are maybe being negatively impacted by it? How do we disciple them through it? I think maybe first question, Josh, what do you think leads people to want to lean into this kind of thing?
I think part of it is probably just the drama of it. Like, it's very exciting. There's probably, for some people, there's maybe an element of like superiority because it's like I'm gonna get taken and you're gonna be left behind. And I think part of it is it's just, I don't know. It feels, what's the word I'm looking for here? It feels very exciting, I guess. I don't know.
In my head, the thought was like, and I think this is kind of down the same vein of what you were talking about. There's often a strong desire in people to know something that everyone else doesn't.
Yes.
And
That's what I was looking for.
And there's like this addiction to kind of hidden knowledge. I think you see it in religious world, often in cults. Like, cult leaders will claim to have some sort of hidden knowledge about the world that nobody else knows but them, and they'll share it with their followers, but you have to follow them. Like, you wonder how people in cults like do things like commit mass suicide. That's part of how. And I think this kind of scratches that itch to some extent. And I think people kind of crave that, like, ooh, here's something cool that I bet you didn't know.
And if you want that, just listen. If you need to scratch that itch, there's a radio show I listen to that I have followed. It really is like a brightening of my morning. I love it so much. It's the Rod Ryan Show. I don't remember the station. It's maybe 94.5 The Buzz in Houston. But every day he has a fun fact of the day. I think every day. And the tagline is, "We make you look smart in front of your buddies. It's the fun fact of the day." So if you want to feel like you have hidden knowledge, just listen to something like that. Go learn some weird fun fact every day. Don't make up theology.
Yeah.
But here's the thing in all of these motivations that we've listed. None of it, I think, is malicious. Now, there are some people who use rapture theology maliciously. Don't get me wrong. But if you have someone in your life who is like really sold on it, it's probably not malicious. So don't treat them as hostile. And I think like the original question was, how do we disciple them? I think that the best way to do it is to point them back to the scripture. And that's going to take time, because what that's going to look like is, hey, can you show me in the Bible where that comes from? And they take you one of these verses and you say, well, can we read the whole chapter? And when it makes references, you say, well, can we go look at those references? And you discover it with them.
Are you quoting Joel Bierman here? Footnotes are good.
Footnotes are good. Even bonus points if you're reading it out of a Lutheran study Bible.
Yeah. But one of our professors from seminary who would quiz us from our readings on the footnotes.
It was so bad.
It honestly, when you're reading theological books, you need to read the footnotes, but you do. A lot of the best nuggets are in the footnotes.
For some of them. Some of them, I barely want to read what they actually wrote. They're kind of full of it. Also, I feel like most people listening to this aren't going to read theological textbooks.
That's fair.
Some of you guys might. I don't. A ton. I guess I sometimes do.
Anyway. If you're doing scientific research, it's also helpful to read the footnotes.
Yeah. But just bring them back to the text and let the text teach them what the text actually says.
Yeah.
And there might reach a point where they're being obstinate and they're manipulating the text. And it's at that point, don't call them on the rapture. Well, you're roundabout calling them on it. In the moment where they're saying, well, this says this, you call them on it. You say, that's not what that's saying. And instead of saying, well, you're wrong, you say, well, that's a misinterpretation of the text, which is also saying you're wrong. But it's kind of at a ground level. And after you look at the text for a while, maybe they should. If you're calling them on faithfully reading the text, they're going to come to this conclusion that the rapture is not biblically sound at all.
Yeah. The other thing that I think it's important to disciple people on is like when you lean into rapture theology, it's oftentimes kind of I have this thing and nobody can touch it. And that's not how we should be treating the faith. Like, this is supposed to be a gift for all. So try and disciple people out of that attitude of like being overprotective of their theology to the point where they're unwilling to share it, because that's not healthy in any way, shape, or form. And we want people to know about Jesus. Jesus makes that pretty clear.
Yeah, that's like a pretty big goal of his.
Yeah. It's like his last words before he departs for heaven or something, you know? Anyway, Josh, I think I'm about ready for takeaways unless you have anything else that you want to touch on here.
Yeah, let's...
There's one other question that got kind of included with this. Does the rapture equal the resurrection? In rapture theology, they include some of the resurrection, or they include the resurrection in there, but it's not it's not what we think of as the resurrection in the Lutheran world.
Yeah, it's resurrections of some dead Christians. It's not like the resurrection, big R, Jesus and everyone.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. We believe the resurrection to be all resurrected on the last day, some brought to heaven, some sent to hell.
Yeah, that's the thing. Christians aren't the only ones who come back.
Yeah.
We're just the only ones who are going to be happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So,
what's your empty netter, Ben?
I think my empty netter is like with anything else that people are struggling with theologically. If somebody's wrestling with the rapture, take them slow. Like, it's a thing that we hear all over the place in our Christian world in the United States, but it's not something that you necessarily see worldwide. It's good for us to expand our horizons and understand how the world and how history has seen these passages, this theology, to know that this isn't necessarily what we're looking at. And it's probably good for us to understand that there isn't some hidden secret knowledge of God that we need to understand perfectly. Instead, we can just lean into his grace.
And almost in conflict with Ben's empty netter, I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off. And my empty netter is a simple one. The rapture is not a thing. And rapture theology is bad. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Brothers and sisters, go in peace. Serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you for listening in to this episode of Cross-Checking, a ministry of Hope and Good Shepherd Lutheran Churches, where we strive to deepen your understanding of the faith and help apply it to daily life. If this podcast is helpful to you, rate the podcast, subscribe to us on your favorite platform, and share it with others who might also gain something from it.